winding stretches of Tuen Mun Road sit under a heavy shroud of midnight mist. Drivers navigate the steep curves with white knuckles and racing hearts. Local legends speak of phantom figures stepping from the shadows directly into the paths of speeding cars. A deep chill settles over anyone traveling this cursed highway alone at night. Constructed along the rugged coastline of Hong Kong, the highway was meant to connect isolated towns. Instead, it became a notorious corridor of tragedy and unexplained phenomena. Thousands of vehicles cross its pavement daily, but as darkness falls, the atmosphere shifts entirely. The bustling traffic gives way to an eerie silence, broken only by sudden screeching tires. Engineers carved the route through steep mountainsides and dense forests in the late 20th century. They ignored local warnings about disturbing ancient burial grounds hidden beneath the soil. Countless graves were uprooted and paved over without proper rituals. Residents whispered that the restless spirits would demand payment for the desecration of their final resting places. The asphalt stretches for miles, with narrow lanes and treacherous blind corners. Heavy rain frequently transforms the slick surface into a deadly trap for unwary motorists. But weather alone cannot explain the sheer volume of catastrophic crashes. Surviving drivers consistently report bizarre occurrences right before losing control of their steering wheels on the darkened stretches. A dense sea fog often rolls in from the nearby ocean waters. It clings to the streetlights and reduces visibility to mere feet. Inside the thick haze, drivers claim to see impossible silhouettes darting across the lanes. These fleeting shadows vanish as quickly as they appear, leaving motorists swerving wildly to avoid hitting thin air. Veteran taxi operators share quiet warnings at local late-night diners. They advise younger drivers to avoid the coastal route between midnight and dawn. Those who must travel the road are told to keep their mirrors turned away. They say looking into the rearview mirror at the wrong moment invites unwanted passengers into the back seat. One evening, a tired delivery driver named Thomas navigated the sharp bends in a heavy downpour. His wipers struggled against the relentless sheet of water washing over his windshield. The radio crackled with bursts of static before dying completely. An unnatural quiet filled the cabin, pressing heavily against his ears like a physical weight. Thomas slowed his truck as the headlights caught a pale figure standing on the shoulder. It was a woman wearing a traditional white dress, entirely soaked by the rain. She did not wave or signal for help, but simply stared straight ahead. Her face remained hidden behind tangled strands of long dark hair clinging to her cheeks. He tapped his brakes, intending to offer the stranded pedestrian a ride to the next town. As the truck coasted closer, the woman slowly turned her head toward the vehicle. Thomas felt an icy grip tighten around his chest when he saw her eyes. They were completely hollow and devoid of any human life or warmth. Before he could accelerate away, the woman stepped directly into the center lane. Thomas slammed both feet onto the brake pedal and braced for the inevitable impact. The heavy tires locked and skidded across the slippery pavement with a deafening squeal. He squeezed his eyes shut, waiting for the sickening thud of metal striking bone. The truck shuddered to a violent halt inches from the guardrail, overlooking the steep cliff. Thomas sat trembling in the driver's seat, with his heart hammering against his ribs. He slowly opened his eyes, expecting to see a broken body on the road. The illuminated asphalt ahead was completely empty save for the falling rain. He stepped out of the cabin on shaky legs to inspect the front bumper. There was no blood and no sign of any impact whatsoever. He searched the dark embankment below with his flashlight, but found nothing. The phantom woman had vanished into the mist, leaving only a profound sense of dread in her wake. This chilling account is far from an isolated incident among Hong Kong motorists. Police records document hundreds of similar crashes along the exact same stretch of road. Many reports note that drivers swerved violently to avoid pedestrians who were never found. Authorities blame fatigue and poor visibility, but locals maintain a much darker conviction entirely. A few months later, a young couple drove home from a late dinner party in the city. The husband kept his eyes fixed on the winding pavement, while his wife dozed in the passenger seat. The streetlights flickered erratically as they approached a notorious curve known for fatal collisions. The air inside the car grew freezing cold. The husband reached to adjust the heater, but the vents were already blowing maximum hot air. Frost began to form on the edges of the windows, despite the humid tropical climate outside. He glanced at the rearview mirror, and his blood ran completely cold. A shadowy figure was sitting upright in the middle of the back seat. The spectral passenger was entirely silent and completely motionless in the shadows. It possessed a vague human shape, but lacked any discernible facial features. The husband gasped and turned his head to look over his shoulder. The back seat was entirely empty, except for a discarded jacket resting on the dark leather upholstery. He turned back to the steering wheel, hoping his exhausted mind was simply playing tricks. But when he looked back into the mirror, the dark silhouette had returned. This time, the entity was leaning forward until its faceless head was right beside his shoulder. A foul smell of stagnant water and decaying earth filled the vehicle. Panic seized the young man as he desperately stomped on the gas pedal. He wanted to escape the haunted corridor as fast as the engine could take them. His sudden acceleration woke his wife, who screamed as the car fishtailed dangerously close to the barrier. She grabbed his arm, begging him to slow the speeding vehicle down. He could not speak to explain the horrific apparition lurking right behind them. He kept his eyes locked straight ahead, refusing to check the mirror again. Suddenly, the steering wheel jerked violently to the left, as if an invisible pair of hands had taken control. The vehicle careened across the dividing line toward oncoming traffic lanes. Blinding headlights from an approaching transport truck flooded the interior of their swerving car. The blast of a massive horn echoed through the mountain pass like a judgment call. The husband wrestled with the wheel, using all his strength to correct the deadly trajectory. He managed to steer away from the heavy truck with mere millimeters to spare. Their car slammed heavily into the concrete, retaining wall on the opposite shoulder. Metal crumpled and glass shattered inward, raining down upon the terrified couple. The airbags deployed with a concussive blast, filling the cabin with pungent white smoke. The vehicle spun twice before coming to a final grinding halt against the steep rock face. Paramedics arrived at the wreckage, fearing the absolute worst for the trapped occupants. Miraculously, both the husband and wife survived with only minor cuts and severe bruising. As emergency workers pulled them from the crushed metal, the husband pointed frantically to the back seat. He begged the rescue team to check on the dark passenger inside. The paramedics searched the interior thoroughly, but found absolutely nobody else in the car. They noted the bizarre frost melting rapidly off the shattered windows. The police took the husband's statement, but dismissed his claims of a ghostly attacker as severe shock. The official accident report cited reckless driving and high speed as the sole causes. News of the violent crash spread rapidly through the surrounding hillside communities. Monks from nearby temples stated that the road was trapped in a cycle of negative energy. They explained that spirits of those killed in previous crashes remained bound to the asphalt. These lost souls sought out the living to share their pain and tragic fate. Desperate community leaders organized elaborate street-side rituals to pacify the restless ghosts. Priests burned incense and offered paper money to appease the wandering dead. They chanted ancient prayers, attempting to guide the confused spirits toward the afterlife. Despite these massive spiritual efforts, the devastating accidents along the winding mountain pass continued to multiply without pause. Some locals categorize the phantoms into distinct types based on survivor testimonies. There is the weeping mother who searches for a child she lost in a terrible rollover. There are the spectral children who bounce phantom balls into the path of speeding cars. Each apparition represents a frozen echo of a violent end upon the blacktop. Another terrifying legend involves a phantom double-decker bus that runs late at night. The enormous vehicle appears in the fog without any illuminating headlights or glowing route numbers. Drivers who find themselves stuck behind the silent bus soon realize something is terribly wrong. The interior lights reveal that all the passengers are completely pale and motionless. A tired commuter named Richard found himself trailing this ghost bus one foggy November night. He followed the slow-moving behemoth for several miles, waiting for a safe chance to pass. He flashed his high beams to signal his intent, but the bus driver never responded. The massive vehicle just drifted silently from side to side. Richard pulled into the passing lane and brought his car parallel to the bus. He glanced over to see the face of the unresponsive driver behind the glass. What he saw made his breath catch in his throat and his blood freeze entirely. The driver's seat was occupied by a decaying skeleton wearing an old transit uniform. Every passenger sitting by the windows slowly turned their heads to stare at Richard. Their faces were rotting skulls, with empty black sockets fixed upon his terrified eyes. The spectral bus suddenly swerved directly into his lane, attempting to force his car off the cliff. Richard slammed his brakes and spun out across the wet highway surface. His car crashed backward into a ditch, narrowly avoiding a sheer drop into the ocean. When Richard looked up through his cracked windshield, the terrifying bus was completely gone. There were no tire marks on the wet road to prove the massive vehicle had ever existed. He spent the entire night shivering in his wrecked car alone. Traffic authorities eventually installed dozens of speed cameras along the most dangerous stretches. They hoped strict enforcement would deter the reckless driving they believed caused the fatalities. Instead, the cameras captured something far more disturbing than speeding luxury cars. The maintenance crews, reviewing the midnight footage, discovered chilling anomalies hidden within the digital frames. Technicians routinely saw transparent figures wandering across the empty lanes in the dead of night. Sometimes, the cameras recorded blurry shapes standing directly in front of approaching vehicles. In one terrifying sequence, a glowing white silhouette appeared to pass completely through a fast-moving transport truck. The footage was quietly locked away to prevent widespread public panic. The psychological toll on frequent commuters has become incredibly heavy over the passing decades. Many drivers grip protective amulets tightly while navigating the winding coastal corridor. Some refuse to travel the route entirely after sunset, preferring to take much longer detours. The fear of encountering a vengeful spirit outweighs the convenience of the direct path home. Highway engineers proposed widening the lanes to improve overall safety for nervous motorists. Construction crews arrived with heavy machinery to cut deeper into the solid rock walls. Almost immediately, the workers began experiencing unexplained equipment failures and sudden extreme nausea. Many men quit the job after seeing dark shadows moving through the trees during their night shifts. One night, a foreman named Michael was inspecting a newly paved shoulder near a tunnel. He heard a soft, weeping sound coming from the darkness beyond the temporary floodlights. Assuming someone was injured, he grabbed a heavy flashlight and walked toward the tree line. The temperature plummeted dramatically as he stepped away from the warm asphalt surface. He found a young woman kneeling in the dirt, clutching a bloody cloth. Michael asked if she needed medical attention and reached out to touch her trembling shoulder. His hand passed completely through her body, as if she were made of cold mist. The woman looked up, revealing a face heavily scarred by shattered safety glass. She let out a piercing shriek that shattered the quiet night and extinguished the floodlights. Michael stumbled backward in total darkness as the phantom wailed in absolute agony. The wind began to howl, fiercely ripping tools and materials from the nearby worksite. He scrambled up the embankment, blindly searching for the safety of his running truck. When the backup generators finally restored power, the terrifying woman was completely gone. Michael found deep claw marks scratched into the metal door of his pickup truck. He resigned the very next morning and never returned to the haunted construction site. The expansion project faced endless delays as fearful workers refused to operate under the mountain shadows. The road continues to claim lives despite the introduction of modern safety barriers and warnings. Each tragic fatality seems to add another restless spirit to the haunted concrete ribbon. Locals believe the mountain acts as a massive stone trap for those who die violently there. The geography itself prevents the confused ghosts from ever moving onward peacefully. Another frequent sighting involves the ghost of a street racer from the early 90s. Witnesses report seeing a vintage sports car roaring up from behind at impossible speeds. The phantom vehicle weaves dangerously through traffic without making a single sound. It tailgates terrified drivers until they panic and pull over before completely vanishing into thin air. A seasoned police officer named David encountered this silent racer during a routine patrol shift. He saw the dark car speeding aggressively through the twisty northern section of the highway. David activated his flashing lights and sirens to intercept the incredibly dangerous midnight driver. He pushed his cruiser to the absolute limit, trying to close the gap. The fleeing sports car took a blind corner at a speed that guaranteed a crash. David slowed down, expecting to find a flaming wreck on the other side of the bend. He rounded the corner cautiously and aimed his spotlight into the dark roadside ditch. There was no smoke and no twisted metal anywhere to be seen. He checked his radar logs, which showed absolutely zero objects ahead of his patrol car. David parked on the shoulder and walked the quiet perimeter, feeling deeply unsettled. He noticed an old memorial plaque nailed to a tree near the edge of the cliff. It marked the exact spot where a young racer perished 30 years ago. paranormal investigators occasionally visit the treacherous road, hoping to record evidence of the supernatural entities. They bring sensitive audio equipment and thermal cameras to the most dangerous bends. Many report capturing strange whispers and sudden massive drops in ambient background temperatures. Their findings consistently align with the terrifying stories told by generations of shaken local drivers. During one investigation, a team set up microphones near the site of the phantom bus. They sat in their dark van monitoring the digital levels as midnight slowly approached. The audio graph suddenly spiked with the distinct sound of screeching tires and shattering glass. They ran outside with cameras, but the long road was completely empty. When they played the recording back, they heard something far worse than a phantom crash. Beneath the horrible noise of tearing metal was the sound of dozens of screaming voices. The voices were begging for help in a chorus of pure, unadulterated suffering. The terrified investigators packed their gear and abandoned the highway project that very night. Tuen Mun Road remains a crucial artery for the bustling population of the vibrant region. Commuters continue to brave the treacherous corners and unpredictable weather patterns out of sheer necessity. The local authorities maintain that physics and bad driving explain every single tragic accident completely. But the mountain fog hides a chilling reality that defies pure logic. Those who have looked into the hollow eyes of the road, dead, know the truth. The highway is a cursed boundary where the living and the deceased constantly collide violently. Driving through the mountain pass means rolling the dice with vengeful and unseen forces entirely. The spirits demand a toll that is often paid in blood and steel. Next time you drive alone late at night, pay close attention to the dark shadows. If the air inside your car suddenly turns freezing cold, do not check the mirrors. Keep your eyes firmly fixed on the pavement ahead and pray for a safe passage. The ghosts of the blacktop are always searching for their next silent passenger.